Hey guys, it's Derek here, and in this episode I'm joined by Ejiro Ogbevoen. Ejiro is a Dublin-based counselling psychotherapist with over 10 years of experience facilitating mental health and well-being. Her qualifications include a bachelor's in science degree in industrial relations and personal management and a bachelor's in science degree in counselling and psychotherapy. She founded Black Therapists Ireland with the intent of actively promoting mental health and well-being amongst Black people in Ireland and globally. In addition to Black Therapists Ireland, Ejiro runs a successful private practice, and she's an assistant lecturer at Dublin City University. In the episode, Ejiro and I discuss barriers to accessing mental health services for the Black Irish community. We discussed the mental health organisation she founded, Black Therapists Ireland, the misconceptions about mental health within the Black community, systemic changes she wants to see from the state with regard to mental health in minority groups, and lots more. Mental health is a very important subject and often goes underemphasized within the Black community, and I honestly believe there's no one better who I could have talked to about the subject than Ejiro. I really enjoyed participating in this conversation with Ejiro, and I learned a lot from it, and I hope you can enjoy and learn lots from it too. Without further ado, here it is. Hey guys, it's Eric here, and I'm back with another episode of the Engaging with Eric podcast. And in today's episode, I'm joined with mental health advocate, mental health professional, and founder of Black Therapists Ireland, Ejiro. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Eric, for inviting me, and I'm glad to be here.
So in this conversation, I'm going to be chatting with Ejiro a bit about mental health in the Black community. Actually, I was at an event last week and the week before last week. It was a double layered event, you could call it. It had two separate initiatives about mental health in the Black community, and Ejiro was the speaker in one event and she attended the second, and she contributed to the conversation about the issue. And her contributions are riveting, very informative, packed with a lot of information in regards to this subject, and it really had me thinking about how underemphasized this topic is within the Black community, but also beyond the Black community here in Ireland. So today we're going to be talking a bit about the subject, but also about Ejiro's fantastic work of Black Therapists Ireland. So my first question, Ejiro, is why did you establish Black Therapists Ireland? I looked at your website and saw that it was about creating a space within which people could seek mental health service and help in a space which respects diversity and various cultural values from the Black community, but ethnic minority communities too. So what pushed you into establishing the enterprise?
Yeah, well, thank you, Eric. In 2020, when COVID hit and, everything was all over the place in Ireland, globally, actually, I was working part-time in retail management, and I was growing my practice in, psychotherapy. And then we had the incident of George Floyd's death, which shook the world, everywhere. People were talking about it, and people were really distressed around his death. And in Ireland, people started seeking for mental health support. People from the Black community started seeking for mental health support. But I wasn't hugely aware of it until a client came to me. She had looked for me and she came onto the screen for our appointment, and she just burst into tears. She was so taken aback that she was sitting down and speaking with a Black therapist. And I explored that a little. I wanted to find out what her challenge had been trying to locate a therapist that she wanted. And she told me about how she would search and it would land everywhere outside Ireland except in Ireland. And so I took that upon myself to, at least solve this small problem. If somebody was looking for a therapist of color, it shouldn't be difficult for them. It's hard enough, whatever experience they were going through. It's hard enough for them. They don't need to have this additional difficulty of finding a therapist that they want. And that was my initiative for starting Black Therapists Ireland.
That's an amazing story. And I think it really speaks to sort of the mantra that representation is very important. We're hearing more of that here in Ireland in different sectors and spheres. But in terms of mental health services, I don't know, is it something that up until now you've noticed has not really been acknowledged, how it's important for the kind of, go on?
No, it hasn't. It hasn't been, until recently, we have all and I can't speak for all the therapists, but personally, I had gone through the training, I am doing the work, and I never really thought about, well, I did think about it a little bit, but the challenge of going into the Black community was huge for me as an individual, and I couldn't find a way. So I just went ahead doing the work in my own little corner. But since I thought about Black Therapist Island and bringing all the therapists together, that has just started a completely different energy. First of all, bringing all of us together just created that sense of representation. Every one of us realized, oh, I'm not alone in this mental health space. And together, we're coming up with ideas and thoughts, supporting each other, but most importantly, being that representation for the community, because so many people didn't realize and still don't realize that there are therapists of color in Ireland that they can relate with. And I think that's important.
Yeah, and I think you're spot on, and it's so great to hear the initiative you took to establish Black Therapists Ireland, because it's obviously needed for so many reasons. But okay, I think we're going to get into sort of the common cultural sort of underpinnings that make mental health a somewhat of a taboo topic within the Black community. So my first question in this regard is, why do you think there's hesitancy? So I guess I have to preface this by saying, from my experience growing up, I've seldom heard anyone talk about mental health in the African community in my locality in Longford. I don't think I've actually heard it from anybody at all. Well-being wasn't a thing that was very referenced frequently. Mental health and mental well-being wasn't something that was referred to much, but education was, and working hard was, and getting a job that preferably makes a lot of, garners a lot of money was, and being a lawyer, an engineer, or a doctor was. There was all of these cultural traits of growing up Black, or growing up as someone of African descent in Ireland, that me and my friends were just about today, but we can never refer back to a time in which mental health was emphasized by members of the African community. So why do you think there's such a hesitancy within the community to engage with the topic of mental health and even go on to seek therapy?
Yeah, well, coming from our background, from our environment, I came from Nigeria, so I know what it's like. I am or was a grown adult by the time I was leaving Nigeria. And for us back home, I don't know, I can speak for Nigeria, but it's the same sense across board when we're talking about other African cultures. It's just that understanding, or rather misunderstanding, around mental health that is associated with the illness. Because when we talk mental health, most people just think distress, madness, all these extreme scenarios around ill health that people just don't want to associate with. And I remember when I was growing up that if you have somebody in your family who has any issues with mental health, the family is sort of seen as it's a stigma. So if you're going to get married from that family, for example, people are going to warn you around, oh, there's somebody there who's not well. And so people would hide the people in their families that have such serious illnesses around mental health. And so it was a shame, it was a taboo, if there was a community role or responsibility, people from such families would not have the advantage. There were disadvantages placed around having one member of your family, not you, a member of your family would stigmatize the whole family. So there was this idea of just keeping it hush hush. So it's huge in our community not to talk about distress in that form. And that, I think, has really impacted us. And when we talk about coming out into an environment like this as immigrants, we come with that sense of you have to go through things. Hardship is almost glorified, both physical and mental. It's almost like the harder it is, and if you can go through it, you're going to be stronger and better at the other end. And we never really take stock of the impact this hardship is having on us. And we are all driven by this sense of survival. And that is what is really huge in our community. We're thinking of survival. That's why we would have parents who would be like, you have to go for a job that is secure, a job that you'll be respected, a job that your money, your family, all of that. So security is at the bottom of our way of being. So mental health is seen as a weakness and nobody wants to go near it. That is the challenge that we have in our community.
Yeah. Wow. It really gets you thinking, because of course I am of Nigerian descent, but I was born in the Western Hemisphere and I was raised in Ireland. So I think it really, you sharing this, it allows myself and all other young people in the Black Arts community to join the dots, because I do think there's somewhat of a generational divide between adults and youth in the Black community here in Ireland, and it manifests itself in sometimes pernicious and toxic ways. And I think the best way to bridge the gap is to have instrumental figures like you speaking about the mentality that elders within the community carry in regards to things like mental health, so we can actually contextualize things and approach it. So on building on top of this, do you think there's any other misconceptions that people in the Black community have when it comes to mental health? Have you heard anything from any Black adults within the community or even youth when it comes to mental health that is just not accurate? Might it be linked to the cultural aspect of things that you spoke to also?
Yeah, like stigma, that's a huge one. We get that. And maybe people, the youth in the society right now, people, our children that are born here would not understand what we are experiencing, why we're so silent about it. I'm sure the youth would not understand that we are coming from a space where you cannot refer to such things. And yes, we are in a new environment. That is why it's important that we talk about it. For those of us who immigrated into Ireland and have raised children, we have to open up to the information that's available to us. But that takes a lot of work in targeting these people and helping us have these conversations, because it's not happening. And our youth and children are suffering because we are afraid to speak about it. Something else is the poor information around mental health. It's good for us to have all this information around, but nothing is really addressing me as a Nigerian coming from Nigeria around mental health. You know, I think that the misconceptions that people of my generation haven't really been addressed in the information that's around. So we still feel like nobody's talking to us, nobody's telling us what we need to be hearing. And that can be a challenge, you know. And as a result, there's poor access to mental health services. We talk about a lot of mental health services around, but people aren't accessing it because they're not sure, they don't know what the information is. So a lot of misconception around that. And not knowing if you then have an issue, I don't think a lot of us really understand how to go about seeking help. And yes, the information are there, but many people will go to the GP, and sometimes the GP, if you're not expressive enough, the GP might just give you medication. And I know most of my people will not take that medication. And then that leaves us stranded because you're not taking medication, you're not seeking support with mental health talking therapy. Then what are you doing? So these are things that I would say there are barriers, you know, around us seeking help when it comes to mental health.
Yeah, and in terms of like, that was really, I think it allows us, what you just said, to appreciate the magnitude of the issue here. It's almost like there's several forces at play in regards to dealing with this issue. So in Black Therapists Ireland, what would you say are the things you think about in regards to approaching some of these issues? Because of course, you knowing what you do and being who you are, you have a great advantage in that you can approach these issues in an authentic manner that many people, let's say within the Irish state, might not be able to, because of the lack of work to understand these issues, but also generally speaking, because of that element of authenticity you have as being someone who is very, professionally literate in an Irish context, but who also shares that Nigerian upbringing. So how do you think within Black Therapists Ireland, what is the primal way you think you're trying to get at this issue?
So first of all, representation, like you mentioned earlier, representation is so important because it's easy for us to talk around awareness and education. So we talk about raising awareness in the Indigenous Irish community. So, we want them to understand. But there's only so much people can understand when it comes to the ethnic minorities and the cultures and our needs and all of that. So awareness is good, education is good, but it cannot replace representation. I know for a fact that if you go into an establishment and you can't see yourself there, there's a hesitation around going in. You just feel, would I be heard? Would I be listened to? So when it comes to mental health, when it comes to mental health, Black Therapists Ireland is about representation. Not only are we representing on behalf of our people in the Black community, other ethnic minority communities who feel like we would understand them more than the white Irish community, because we would relate with the Arabs, the Indians. All these people feel, oh no, I think I would find support here, and these people would understand me more. So representation is key. Education is great, and awareness, which is something we're doing on the other side, where we're helping our white colleagues to understand how they can best understand their biases and support them to provide services for everyone in the community, because there are so many people in the ethnic minority communities that don't necessarily have to come to Black Therapists because they're comfortable going anywhere, and that's fine. But we want to also support the white therapists to provide culturally safe and, competent spaces so people don't feel like they would not be heard. Because at the end of it, a therapist that's trained should be able to sit with a person, no matter who they are. But sometimes it's not so much the therapist that people have issues with. It is what I am bringing as a person of color with all my experiences. If I've had a boss who didn't treat me right, or a teacher who didn't treat me right, when I go sit with a therapist, all these things will be playing in my mind. And I'm thinking, would this therapist be able to hear me? So for us in Black Therapists Ireland is to be able to represent, support our white colleagues and establishments to help them provide accurate and, well-balanced support for our community. I think those are two things that we would be doing. And something else that I think I am working on now, but I really would like to drive that, it is the targeted awareness campaigns towards the African community. Like, we need to speak to us in the language that we understand. And I don't mean English. I mean in the terms, using the words that we get. This is something that needs to happen. And I hope Black Therapists Ireland would lead the way when it comes to that.
Yeah, that sounds so superb. So superb. And I think one thing that's for sure, and I interact with this fact frequently because of my role as the politics coordinator at Black and Irish, but also because of my personal interests. The fact is that Ireland is diversifying gradually, and the idea of being Irish is expanding rapidly, in that so many different people are now included in the social fabric of the nation, and now included in the natural and national mold, and therefore we have to respond to Ireland's diversity in a manner that accounts for it, appreciates it, and facilitates its well-being. And I think in regards to therapy and the work that you're doing and mental health, it's so important that establishments like Black Therapists Ireland are present so that we can deal with Ireland's diversity within this mental health sector. And the equivalent can be said for many other sectors in regard to responding to Ireland's diversity. So I think the work you're doing is right on the ball, and hopefully we see more work from the state. Would you say the state is doing much at all in regards to engaging ethnic minorities with mental health and using the appropriate language, as you put it, to reach them and engage them with mental health services?
To be honest with you, I think a lot of organizations are working hard, but it's not reaching the target. And I think that's where we, as the ethnic minorities, need to step up to channel the information that most organizations are working hard trying to do. So they are limited in their experiences, they are limited in the knowledge they have, and the only way is to work with us. And I'm really encouraging us in whatever field or area you're in. It is presumed that the indigenous community should provide XYZ. And yes, they should. But there's so much information missing due to the experiences that they do not have. And that's where we come in. And we have to step up. Otherwise, we would always have that gap. And we are the ones who would experience the loss of not having effective services that meet our needs. They don't know what our needs are unless we say it and we tell them. So are they doing work? They are. They could do more. But I think in conjunction with the ethnic minority groups, we will all go far.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, my next question is sort of linked to a theme that has run through a lot of what we said already, vis-a-vis barriers and misconceptions, and it's about general cultural barriers. At the events that we were at for the past two Saturdays, religion came up and superstition came up and culture came up a lot, things that can sometimes act as an impediment that prevent people within the community from seeking mental health services and mental health help. So my first question is, how do you think we can circumvent that effectively and ensure that these are cultural facets of different segments of the Black community don't act as an impediment or a barrier to seeking like necessary mental health help? And secondly, it's a two-pronged question. How do you think the religious world within the Black community, but also in Ireland, could assist and facilitate possibly people's pursuit for mental health services? Because I know that through my community work with the Longford Africans Network in Longford, for example, and through various other community initiatives, is that if you want to reach people within the Black community, one of the first place stops you have to visit is the church. It's the best way to do it. And religious leaders, a lot of them do great work within the community, and they have a great sway and influence within the community. So firstly, how do we circumvent the cultural and possibly religious barriers? But also, what do you think you'd like to see from religious leaders within Ireland to really hit home the point that mental health matters and people have to look after their mental health?
Yeah, Eric, that is such a fantastic, question, and really on point when it comes to the cultural bias that we have that is influenced by our religion. I want to state that religion has provided so much comfort for a lot of people. It gives comfort in community. It gives comfort in so many ways, peace of mind. To an extent, people who feel lost, there is some level of comfort that comes out of the church or the mosque, whatever religion that people go to. So I just want to state the value that brings to our community, because a lot of people will be lost without that. However, a lot of people are suffering with depression and anxiety and a lot of mental health issues that they could easily work with. And the fear of, or the beliefs that if you seek this kind of help, you don't trust God, you don't believe enough, you're not praying enough. All these things is making people continue to dig their foot deep down, hoping and praying that somehow all of these problems they'll get to a point where it goes away. And the reality is, if you don't address the problem, it's not going anywhere. It's getting worse. And I want to say to people in the religious environment is that look at yourself as an organism that has significant aspects of you. It's like you saying your heart is more important than your liver, or your liver is not as important as your lungs. Like, you have all these big organs that keep you running as a whole. If your liver fails, there's no point. Your heart is going to get into trouble. If your lungs is not doing what it's supposed to do, something is going to fail. If you take care of your spiritual health and your mental health is in trouble, you are in trouble. Let's understand that these parts of you are different aspects of you. You cannot take your spiritual life and the work that you're supposed to be doing there to mean that it's going to take care of your physical health, your mental health, your every other health. All these things need different ways of you caring. And until you acknowledge that and begin to do the work that's necessary for each part, then you as a whole will always be incomplete and not be your best self. So what can we do with pastors and religious leaders? A lot of them, they are doing great work. I want to state that many pastors, they are doing great work, but they have to appreciate that the mental health of their people, of the people in the churches and their religious homes, it's not up to them. It's an individual thing. Yes, you are a spiritual guide, but you cannot lead an individual when it comes to how they are managing their stress, what their beliefs are in their own self, what they have carried from home, what their work or challenges are. All these are things that are impacting them, and it is right for them to seek support. Just like they will seek support for physical health, it is right for them to seek support mentally. And it is up to these leaders to make it possible. Encourage people, because what's the point when everyone in your congregation seems happy, but in reality they are not? I think that's just the saddest thing ever, where people don't believe that depression is in the church or anxiety is in the church. That's so sad.
Yeah. Really, really well put. I think it also sort of points to the minimized role that people see mental health as playing in regards to how we navigate our lives. You mentioned physical health there, for example. If somebody was suffering with a serious physical ailment, I imagine that the pastor or religious leaders, or anyone for that matter, within the Black community or beyond, would implore the person suffering with a physical ailment to seek medical help in the hospital. But once it's mental health, it's placed on a sort of degraded, lowly standard and level. And people don't see the significance in treating to the problem. And I guess it's really complicated in a religious sense, because they're more tempted, if you look at, for example, the monotheistic traditions, the idea of the body and the spirit, they're more tempted to assign the mental health to the spiritual realm, which really complicates approaching the issue. But I don't think you could have put it better than you did there. We really need people to stand up and take the issue seriously going forward.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, honestly, the mental health aspect is, if we in the Black community begin to truly appreciate it, this whole idea of how we're raising our children, what it looks like, what it means, for us, we're gonna, get rid of so many challenges that we will then be able to truly experience that wealth of health that we're looking for in the churches, in the spiritual places. It's for us to be good and strong and healthy and well. But if you're not there and you're using one method to try to cure all of it and you're still not well, after a point, you really should consider maybe this isn't working, and to be honest, nobody would go ask their pastor, should I go to the doctor? Nobody would ask that. But why do we feel like we need to say to the pastor, should I go see a psychotherapist or need some kind of approval for your mental health? It's such an individual thing. Take responsibility for it. And the support is there. If it wasn't, that's a different thing, but the support is there. So let's avail of it.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Ejiro, for your amazing points. I hope people really pass heed to that, because this is definitely going to be a defining issue, I think, for a large segment, a large swath of the community going forward. My next question is back to the idea of there being a generational divide within the Black community vis-a-vis mental health. I think as of late, I've heard a lot of conversations amongst young Black Irish people that are filled with disdain and anger and grief in regards to their experiences growing up, with respect to their interaction with their parents, because of the fact that they believe that their parents undermined the mental health struggles that they went through. And I think bridging that gap starts with, again, educating both parties involved about the environment that young people grew up in, but also the environment within which adults grew up in. But what do you think going forward, what would you say to young people that they should try to do to ensure that the next generation of Black Irish people grow up in an environment where mental health is seen as a serious subject, where although they know that their parents may have faltered because of things that are out of their control, experiential factors, they can ensure that through their own experience, they don't pass on the iniquities and the sins of previous generations and allow the consequences of those sins to fall upon latter generations?
Yeah. First of all, I would say take ownership of your health. Listen, our parents did a lot of, they did what they thought was best for them. Even myself, I made so many mistakes while I was raising my children. And looking back, I can see how I could have done it differently. The best thing we can do first as parents is, if you know you have erred, or if you understand what you erred at, it doesn't matter. We can start today. It doesn't matter. Today you have the opportunity to begin to shape your future. It doesn't matter what has gone on. If your relationship with your children have been, disrupted in ways that you feel could have been better, that's no problem. Let's see how we can repair things today. And then when we talk about the youth, educate yourself. Like if you say your parents did poorly, well, if you don't educate yourself and improve your own understanding, you as well are going to just repeat the same mistake. You see, the thing about parenting is we understand a lot of things, but when stress happens and difficulty comes, we revert to what parenting we saw. We revert to how our own parents treated us, because we're so stressed and we're looking for, oh my God, what should I do now? And we revert to things that we said we wouldn't do, but now we find ourselves doing it. And that's why we see a lot of people say things like, oh, I'm exactly like my mom. And I hate and I don't like how my mom did it. But here I am doing exactly what my mom did. So for the youth, if you want to change, you have to educate yourself. You have to make choices that are different from the choices that your parents made. And yes, there's anger, there's frustration, but use that energy to support yourself, to create an experience today for yourself, so that you will pass on the knowledge, making it easier for your children. Mental health in the community right now is still being tainted with a lot of anger and frustration and, blame and all that stuff is what's going on for us. We want to heal from all this. There's too much going on for us, Black people, with the challenges of our own experiences in the world. And for us to be also challenged within ourselves with such things as mental health. Taking care of yourself is so needed that we cannot just put it aside and just hope that somehow it's going to be better. No, take responsibility for yourself. If your parents didn't do it, that's fine. But you are not going to be one of those who's not going to do it. And when it comes to talking about mental health, you treat yourself right. You will definitely treat your children the way that you know is right.
Wow, immense words. Honestly, I couldn't agree more. I do think there needs to be a feel of initiative amongst younger generations to ensure that this standard and threshold is raised, and that, again, the sins, as stated previously, and iniquities of prior generations aren't carried on. So thank you so much for your amazing words. My next question is, it's a pretty significant question, and you've already, I think, fed into the answer to this question, but what would you like to see systematically in Ireland in regards to catering to the mental health issue within the Black community here in Ireland? Things you'd like to see possibly by the state, by young people too? What can they do in regards to speaking to this issue formally and informally? Generally speaking, across the board, what would you like to see, again, in a systematic context, to really shift the position of the ball on this issue and allow us to make positive developments in this respect?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about it when we talked about representation and hoping, across board, people are beginning to see themselves in teaching roles, in the guards, in doctors. Like, there's so many, well, not so many, but the medical profession is where we see quite a lot of people of color, and in the care professions, a lot of people of color. But you see, some of these professions are heavy with ethnic minority due to a sense of looking for security. And we want to be able to go across board. So there's so many opportunities in so many fields. I want to encourage us to step into filmmaking, whatever it is that we may not see the security right now, but let our passion drive us. So across board, we need to see ourselves in these places. And if you haven't seen someone, then you are the someone who needs to be there in that field. So when you do it systematically, we now go on to the organizations that exist. So many organizations right now, and if I want to speak to maybe just the mental health organizations, there is very limited strategies or campaign towards ethnic minority. And I would say that ignorance around what to do is really fueling that gap where people are not sure how to meet the needs of the ethnic minority. So there needs to be change when it comes to that. There's a lot of talk around inclusion and diversity, a lot of talk, but we need to see action when it comes to this. And it's not just talk. It's nice, it's a nice thing to talk about, but we have to see the action behind that, and inclusion and diversity includes so many aspects: disability, women, all of that are important issues that needs to be addressed. But in the midst of all these issues, race always does not come to the table. And that's why I want to stand behind race, because we forget. It's easy for race to just go all the way down, because it's easier to deal with gender or disability because we can all see ourselves there. But when it comes to race, it's difficult for the white community to see themselves there. And so they don't know how to address that. But for every organization, if you begin to put people of color, the ethnic minority, in positions where they can support the organization to create opportunities so that everyone is looked after in the community. That is one thing that I would say for systematic, change that could happen. And I have a little something when it comes to Black Therapist Ireland, which I will share at the end, hopefully, as something that is an initiative that I want to begin. And it is all about supporting us, Black or ethnic people in our community. So, yeah.
Yeah, the opportunity to share that will come very soon. Actually, I actually have one more question left, and this question is quite you could call it an informal one for anyone listening, who's within the community but beyond, and who's for the first time actually hearing a lot of their issues being discussed out loud that they might not have felt they could consider because of a lot of the cultural obstacles that we spoke to, and who's wondering what to do next. You know, they might identify a particular mental health related issue that they have and not know where to go or what to do. Is there anything you'd advise them? Because I imagine it's a very daunting thing to, for the first time, go to therapy or to get in touch with a particular organization who provides services in this regard. So is there any advice or tips you'd give to them?
Yeah. You see, I went for a workshop. I gave a workshop one time, and it was about stress. And a few people realized that, oh my God, my experiences that I've been having is as a result of stress. And this is a mental health issue. Most people don't realize that the challenges that they are experiencing, lack of sleep, lack of concentration, lack of, all these things are as a result of not caring for their mental health. And so, first of all, what are you challenged with? Like, what is the difficulty that you're experiencing? We need to come to an understanding in the Black community that there's no glory in hardship. Like suffering, there's this, like, listen, suffering there's no badge for suffering. And we need to come out of that space where within ourselves, life itself is hard enough. Within ourselves, we have to find a way to find comfort, to find peace, to find good stuff, pleasure in our lives. It doesn't have to be as hard as we make it to be. Hardship does not equal success. And that's one thing I want to say to us in the Black community. So if you're experiencing symptoms, for us, our symptoms get so difficult that it becomes a physical pain. So we have all these pains in our bodies and we do all these numerous tests, and because we're sure it's a physical thing and everything is coming out clean. Your test results are all clear and your pain isn't going. That means there's something else going on, and maybe it is not spiritual. Nobody is after you from home. There's no witch involved. It is your mental health and what you are doing that you need to be responsible for. So where do you go? I would suggest there are a few. You can get information on the website, on websites or on the internet that would educate you around some symptoms that you're experiencing and suggestions as to what you can do that can support yourself. And you have to look at reliable sources for this. The HSE website is a good one. And there's so many organizations that would have support available for you, okay? And the first point of call when you say, okay, this is my challenge, I would like to speak to somebody, is to go to your GP. The GP is our first call for primary care, and talk to your GP around the kind of support that you need. Don't just go to your GP and then take anything and go away. It's a conversation with you and your GP. If they're referring you for medication, well, ask that is there alternative, things that you could do. Your GP is meant to support you. And then there's so many helplines that are out there. I'm sure we can find that information for you to add it to this link, where so many helplines. You can text in for inquiries. You can make phone calls, anonymous, where you will get the support that you need. And I think we really should embrace these initial steps before you not commit yourself to therapy, but commit the time to go in to see somebody. But I promise you, therapy is not as scary as people think it is. It is such a warm and wonderful experience. Once you find somebody that you can talk to, you will be blown away with the experience of therapy. I hope I've answered that question, Eric.
Resoundly, like that was excellent. I'm
Thank
sure
you.
anyone listening to that or after listening to that who is questioning whether they're experiencing something will not know what to do next. So thank you so much for your answer.
You're
And
so welcome.
I know you have an initiative that you want to share. So the floor is yours. You can proceed with sharing it.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Eric. I am so excited because this is the first place that I'm going to be talking about it. So thank you, Eric, for this opportunity. It's going to go down in the sands that this is where this is coming from. So this is an initiative that I have thought about for a while, and it just haven't come together until recently. And for me, it is to get it's very simple. Some organizations are already doing it, but BTI would like to start up we're looking for well-being advocates. We want people across Ireland to come together to support ourselves. You see, there's one thing missing in the Black community globally. It's unity, togetherness. And I believe mental health is an avenue. Like if we talk about every other thing, we can find ways to divide and be like, you're this, I'm that. You know, we look for every single way to say you're Nigerian, I'm Ghanaian, you're this, you're that. No. But when it comes to mental health, Black mental health, I want us to come together. If you know 5 people, 5 people is all you need to know. I want you to choose to be the advocate, the champion for these 5 people that is in your community. And from this, if every 5 people have one advocate, then we're taking care of ourselves. And I want this to go across Ireland where we're having workshops that are personal or specific to each group of people. You know, you want somebody to come talk to you around whatever it is that that's going on for you. 5 moms, if you are friends, come together. Black therapists, you have an advocate amongst you. We would offer training and support so that you can take care of these 5 people. The well-being of these 5 people is something that you're talking about, because I know that for us, we're very private people, and maybe going out wouldn't be a huge thing when it comes to mental health. But maybe it's easy for us to talk amongst ourselves, our 5 friends, you know. And I want people to step forward and be advocates for their community with the support of Black Therapist Ireland.
Wow, well, it deserves a round of applause. It sounds superb, a superb initiative, and I'm so glad that I'm so privileged and blessed that it was my platform that you shared it on for the first time. So yes, I'm actually going to link the website for Black Therapist Ireland in the description and your social media tags also. And yes, if you've all heard it, so if you are interested in taking up this amazing opportunity to be trained, for you to be an advocate within your community, for 5 people in your immediate environment, you can get in touch with Black Therapists Ireland and proceed with this. It's a very innovative sort of initiative. I haven't heard of anything like this before, and I wish you all the best of luck. And I'll see how I can get involved with it too, because it's an opportunity that I certainly can't bypass.
Thank you so much, Eric. I really hope that we come together and let mental health become a very easy conversation for us. If we want the future generation to be better, we have to be better.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining me today on the Engaging with Eric podcast. It was so amazing to have you on. I learned so much listening to you in the Longford Africans Network initiative that I referred to at the start of this event, or rather discussion. And I've learned so much from you in today's conversation also. So continue the amazing work you're doing. You're a huge inspiration. And thank you. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much, Eric, for having me.
Perfect. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.